Next, your life as every level of bank robber. What if I told you that the difference between a successful bank heist and a federal prison sentence comes down to preparation, psychology, and one critical decision you make in the first 30 seconds? Today, we're exploring what your life looks like at every single level of bank robbery. And trust me, the gap between level 1 and level 10 isn't just about the money you steal, it's about everything you're willing to lose. Let's start at the bottom. Level 1 is where most people start. You're desperate. Maybe you've got medical bills piling up, or your job just disappeared, or you're staring at an eviction notice. You walk into your local bank at 3 p.m. on a Thursday, your heart pounding so hard you think the security guard can hear it. Your hands are shaking as you write a note on the back of a deposit slip. This is a robbery. Put the money in a bag. You slide it across the counter. The teller's eyes go wide. Your adrenaline spikes. And here's what happens next, and this is where most level 1 robbers make their fatal mistake. You panic. You grab whatever cash is in reach, maybe $300, maybe $2,000 if you're lucky. Then you run. You don't have a car waiting. You don't have a plan for the next hour. You just run. You make it 2 blocks before you realize you've still got the demand note in your hand with your fingerprints all over it. By the time you get home, law enforcement has already pulled the security footage. You're arrested within 48 hours. Your sentence? 5 to 10 years. Your life? Completely over. But what if you actually thought about it first? Level 2 is the guy who does his research. You spend weeks watching the bank. You notice the shift changes at 3 p.m. and 11 p.m. You see that the manager takes a break at 2:15. You observe that there are only 2 security guards during weekday afternoons, and one of them spends most of his time on his phone. You start to understand the rhythm of the place. When you actually walk in, you're not panicked, you're methodical. You've written a better note, you're dressed forgettably. You've got a basic disguise, sunglasses, a baseball cap, nothing that screams, "I'm doing this on purpose." You hand over the note. The teller cooperates because these are trained employees who know that money is insured. You get maybe $5 to $10,000. It takes you 2 minutes and 30 seconds. But here's the thing about level 2. You still haven't thought about what comes after. You left in the same car you arrived in. Witnesses got a decent look at your height and build. You didn't account for the fact that the bank probably has multiple cameras from multiple angles. You might get away with it for 3 weeks. You might even get away with it for 3 months if you're lucky. But eventually, that video footage circulates. Someone recognizes you. You get caught. The difference? You might knock 5 years off your sentence, but you're still going to prison. Level 3 is where planning actually becomes serious. You understand that the post-robbery period is more important than the robbery itself. You get a vehicle that's not registered to you. You've got a friend's uncle who doesn't ask questions and doesn't know your real name. You case the bank for a full month and you've identified not just the rhythm of the bank, but the rhythm of the surrounding area. You know exactly how long it takes for police to respond to calls in this district. You know there's a construction zone 3 blocks away that always causes traffic delays on Main Street. You time your robbery for a Tuesday afternoon when there's a high school field trip happening. Extra pedestrian traffic means extra confusion. You wear clothes from a thrift store that you'll burn after. You've got a second outfit hidden in a duffel bag in the back seat. You wear gloves. You've thought about DNA evidence, about hair fibers, about anything that could connect you to this crime. When you hand over the note, you're calm. Your voice is steady. You're not making sudden movements. You get $20,000 because you took the extra 30 seconds to be clear about what you want. You leave. You drive to a parking garage 6 blocks away, change your clothes, wipe down the car, and leave it there. You take public transit home. At this level, you might actually get away with it. You might genuinely pull off a bank robbery and never get caught. But here's what's happening in your head at level 3. You're starting to understand the psychological cost. Every siren makes your stomach drop. Every knock on the door could be it. You've got a small stash of cash hidden, but you can't spend it without raising suspicion. You go to your regular job the next day and pretend everything is normal while your hands are shaking under the table. The money isn't worth the paranoia, but you don't realize that yet. Level 4 is where you start recruiting. You realize that pulling off a successful bank robbery alone is actually incredibly difficult. You need a driver who won't panic. You need a lookout. You need someone to help you case the location. You need people you can trust with your life, because if any of them talks, you all go down. This is where your life gets complicated. You're not just managing your own risk anymore, you're managing theirs. You've got to pick people who are desperate enough that they won't talk, but competent enough that they won't get you caught. This is harder than it sounds. At level 4, you're pulling off robberies that net maybe $40,000 to $50,000 split between 3 people. You're hitting banks in different districts to avoid pattern recognition. You're using techniques you've learned from watching other criminals, from online forums you found on the dark web, from people who've done this before and lived to tell about it. But here's what happens at level 4 that's different from the lower levels. Law enforcement starts to notice. They're seeing a pattern, same MO, similar timeframes, similar geographic areas. The FBI gets interested. They start setting up task forces. They start running facial recognition on security footage. They start comparing notes across jurisdictions. One of your crew members gets pulled over for a traffic violation. He's got cold feet anyway. He makes a deal with the feds. You're all arrested. Your sentence jumps to 15 to 20 years. And now you're sitting in a federal prison realizing that the moment you brought other people into this, you lost control. Level 5 is institutional knowledge. You've done research, real research. You understand banking systems. You understand that different banks have different security protocols. You understand that some banks are connected to armored car services and some aren't. You understand that the moment you walk into a bank, you're in the sightline of at least 6 cameras running on a loop that stores footage for 90 days minimum. At level 5, you're not just planning a single heist, you're planning a series of them. You've got a network of associates who understand tradecraft. You've got safe houses. You've got a way to move money that doesn't immediately flag federal agents. You understand cryptocurrency. You understand how to structure transactions to stay below the reporting threshold. You're also starting to understand the psychology of your victims. Bank tellers are trained not to fight. Bank managers want to comply because they're instructed to. The real danger isn't getting caught in the moment. It's the digital trail you leave behind. At level 5, you might actually be successful. You might pull off 5 or 6 robberies before law enforcement connects them all to you. You might accumulate $200,000. You might actually have a shot at disappearing. But here's the problem. The better you are at this, the more resources law enforcement dedicates to catching you. You're no longer a local police problem, you're an FBI problem. And the FBI doesn't give up. Level 6 is where you're not just avoiding capture, you're outsmarting the system itself. You understand banking infrastructure so well that you can predict security responses. You know exactly how long it takes for a bank to trigger a silent alarm. You know how many officers will respond and from which precinct. You've timed robberies down to the minute. You're hitting banks in a 3-state area. Each robbery is slightly different to avoid pattern recognition. You're using different vehicles. You're using different crews, but they're all people you've trained extensively. You've got countermeasures for facial recognition. You've got a communication system that law enforcement can't easily intercept. At level 6, you're pulling in $300,000 to $400,000 per year. You've got multiple safe houses. You've got a legitimate-looking business as a cover. You've got a network of accountants, lawyers, and fixers who help you move money. But here's what's happening psychologically. You're becoming increasingly isolated. The people you trust are criminal associates. You can't maintain normal relationships because normal people would notice the inconsistencies in your story. You're always looking over your shoulder. You're always assuming that someone is watching. And the terrifying part? Someone probably is. The FBI has a task force dedicated to you specifically. They don't know your name, but they know your MO. They're analyzing every robbery you commit. They're using behavioral analysis to try to predict where you'll strike next. Level 7 is where you've learned to think like law enforcement. You study criminal psychology. You read about past robberies and why those criminals got caught. You understand that most criminals get caught because they do something predictable. They spend the money in ways that are traceable. They brag. They tell someone they trust who eventually betrays them. They make one careless mistake. At level 7, you're methodical in ways that most criminals aren't. You don't spend the money, you store it. You've got $500,000 in cash hidden across 4 different locations, and you've memorized the exact coordinates. You live modestly. You drive a used car. To anyone looking at you, you're invisible. Your robberies are now perfectly executed. You're hitting banks that you've studied for months. You understand their security systems better than their own security managers do. You're in and out in 90 seconds. You're taking $30,000 to $40,000 per job. You're doing this once every 3 months. To the law enforcement perspective, you're a ghost. They know you exist, but they can't prove it. They've got patterns, but nothing that stands up in court. They've got suspicions, but no hard evidence. But at level 7, something else is happening. The stress is literally killing you. You're having heart palpitations. You're not sleeping well. You're making paranoid decisions that don't make sense. You once left a bank because someone's shoes made a squeaking sound that reminded you of a police radio. You're no longer thinking clearly. You're in a constant state of hypervigilance, and that's when mistakes start happening. Level 8 is the professional criminal. This isn't your first crime. Bank robbery is your career. You've got an exit strategy that isn't just about escaping the police, it's about disappearing completely. You've got a fake passport. You've got money in offshore accounts. You've got a plan to leave the country within 72 hours if anything goes wrong. You're working with people who've done this before. You've got a retired security expert consulting on your jobs. You've got connections to people in law enforcement who've been bribed or blackmailed into looking the other way. At this level, you're not just committing robberies, you're corrupting the system. Your robberies are now targeting specific banks that you know have security vulnerabilities. You're not hitting convenience store banks. You're hitting regional banks with high transaction volumes and less sophisticated security. You've got inside information from a bank employee who's being paid. You might pull in $500,000 to $1 million per year. You're funding a lifestyle that allows you to blend in with legitimate wealthy people. You've got a house in a nice neighborhood. You've got a legitimate job as cover. You've got investments that look clean. The law enforcement response has evolved too. You're not dealing with a task force anymore. You're dealing with multiple federal agencies coordinating at the highest levels. Your face is on a bulletin board in the FBI field office. The feds have assigned a senior agent whose entire job is to catch you. Level 9 is where you've become legendary. There are literally textbooks written about your crimes. Law enforcement studies your techniques in training academies. Criminals copy your methods. The media has nicknamed you. The public is fascinated by you. At this level, you're not just committing robberies, you're making a statement. Every heist is carefully planned not just to get money, but to highlight security failures in the banking system. You might leave behind evidence that proves banks aren't as secure as they claim. You might target banks that have discriminatory practices. You're a criminal, but you're a criminal with a philosophy. You've pulled off maybe 20 major robberies. You've stolen millions of dollars. And somehow, despite the entire weight of the federal government dedicated to catching you, you're still free. You might have faked your death. You might have left the country and are operating from somewhere with limited extradition treaties. You might have simply become so invisible that law enforcement has given up looking. But here's the psychological reality of level 9. You're completely alone. You can't maintain relationships. You can't trust anyone. You can't ever truly relax. Every moment of freedom is borrowed time. You know that eventually law enforcement will catch up. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And at level 9, you've accepted that. And finally, there's level 10. Level 10 is the architect. You're not just committing robberies, you're designing systems that facilitate them. You own a legitimate security company that consults with banks. This gives you insider access to security systems, security protocols, and architectural layouts. You understand exactly how to exploit every single vulnerability because you're the one who's supposed to be protecting against them. You've never personally walked into a bank to commit robbery. You've never seen the money. You've never been exposed to direct law enforcement contact. Instead, you work through cutouts and operatives who have no idea they're working for you. They think they're freelance criminals operating independently. They don't know they're part of a larger organization. You coordinate robberies across multiple states, maybe multiple countries. You've got people in law enforcement, in banking, in government, all working for you. Some know they're working for you, some don't. You've got leverage on people in positions of power. You're not stealing millions of dollars anymore. You're stealing tens of millions of dollars, and you're doing it so cleanly that it doesn't even register as theft in most cases. Some of it is laundered through legitimate business operations that you own. Some of it is moved through international banking systems that you control. The law enforcement response is now a coordinated international effort. Multiple countries are investigating. Interpol is involved. Intelligence agencies are trying to track your network, but you're so insulated, so protected by layers of plausible deniability that they can't prove anything. At level 10, you've transcended criminal activity. You're not a bank robber anymore. You're a crime boss. You've got legitimate businesses, real estate holdings, and political connections. Your money is so mixed with legal income that it's impossible to separate. You're funding community projects to build goodwill. You're donating to charity to launder money and buy legitimacy. The scariest part about level 10, you might actually get away with it. There are criminals throughout history who operated at this level and never got caught. They died of natural causes, wealthy and respected in their communities, their crimes never definitively proven. But here's what the vast majority of criminals at every single level don't understand until it's too late. The lifestyle catches up with you. Even if you don't get caught, the paranoia, the isolation, the constant stress of maintaining the facade, it destroys you from the inside. You can steal millions of dollars and still end up with nothing, because the things that make life worth living, genuine relationships, peace of mind, the ability to walk through the world without fear, those aren't things you can buy with stolen money. Those are things you lose the moment you decide to operate outside the law. So yeah, your life as every level of bank robber starts with desperation and ends with either federal prison or a kind of freedom that isn't actually free at all. Which level would you make it to before you realized the money wasn't worth what it costs?